What is it about marriage material and 5? It's like we got the 5 love languages. Does it have to be 5? Are there only 5? I want to know, could there have been 10? What's the deal?
So, yeah, okay. So some of this, yes, was to make it easier, but some of this actually was a scientific thing. What we found in the research for this is for most women, the same 5 things tend to matter.
Wow.
And for most men, the same 5 things tend to matter. So these are the things that where just a little bit of effort in a particular way has a big impact. That's what these are.
What is it about those happy couples that makes them so stinking happy? What we're going to discover in this episode today is that it's actually surprisingly simple and easy. Do you remember when you got married and it was like you did all these things for each other that was spontaneous? You'd rub each other's necks, you'd hold each other's hands as you're walking through a parking lot. You would write each other spontaneous notes. And now it's like when married couples see younger couples do that, they kind of roll their eyes like, are you kidding me? But what we're going to discover today is that actually those little things that we did, we'll find out from these happy couples that they keep doing them. And you'll find out that there's 5 things that a wife does for her husband that are unique, and there's 5 things that a husband does for his wife. You won't believe how stupidly simple these things are. So let's dive into this episode of Married with Benefits. You know, Shaunti, as I think about this secret, it reminded me of growing up. We were talking about this, what sports we played, and whether you were a musician, whether you played basketball or volleyball, and we were talking about how you were in musical theater.
Oh, totally.
Which I don't know that I would have pegged that.
Oh, totally. Always the choreographer.
Yeah, like Broadway type stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, dance captain.
And your daughter played volleyball.
And she was the athlete. Yes, she was all into volleyball.
So basketball was my love. It was my sport.
Well, you're so tall.
Oh, well, thank you. But
you
know, it's like you're so tall, and so you play, you're like 6 feet, and so you play center at every level until you get to high school, and then you're short. And so if you never practice dribbling, you're in trouble when you get to high school, which is what happened to me. I was a legend in my own mind, did not really play at the next level very well. But what I do remember about that and how it relates to this secret specifically is that you'll remember it's like whatever you did, whether it was music and you were playing the scales, whether it was sports, you started with the fundamentals.
Yep.
And so every practice, it was dribbling with the right hand, dribbling with the left hand. It was layups. It was free throws. It was bounce passes. It was passes. Eventually you learn more complex skills, but you never stop practicing the fundamentals. Here's the thing about fundamentals is that they never feel natural at first. It's hard to dribble with my left hand when I'm right-handed. I don't always do well with my layups, whatever it might be. My free throws didn't come. None of this came natural until you did it over and over and over and over again. And listen, if no one tells us differently about what the fundamentals of being a spouse are, you just end up mimicking what you saw.
Yeah. Well, you end up doing what comes naturally to you, which is awesome, but it may not be what your spouse needs.
That's exactly right. We are looking at the secrets of highly happy couples, and these really are the pros. They're the ones that they mastered the fundamentals. They learned them early on. They practice them. What are the basic things that they do time and time again? And that's what makes their marriage go to that next level. We talked about in session 1 how it's not the big ticket items that wreck a marriage, right?
Yep. Well, certainly not the big ticket issues that tend to cause the problems that come up day to day.
Right.
Yep.
And so we talked about how it's the little things going in the wrong direction. And so today we want to talk about the little things that help us go in the right direction. You call them in your book, The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages. These are the fantastic 5. And I have to say, it's like, what is it about marriage material and 5? It's like we got the 5 love languages. Does it have to be 5? Are there only 5? I want to know, could there have been 10? What's the deal?
So, yeah, okay. So some of this, yes, was to make it easier, but some of this actually was a scientific thing. In the research, these 5 things kept coming up over and over and over, and we kept hearing them, and then hearing them especially from these happiest couples. And so when we quantified them, and, we asked other questions, it was like, yep, these 5 things just tend to matter for men to their wives.
Right.
And these 5 things just tend to matter from the wives to their husbands. It just is a thing.
Did Gary Chapman, the author of 5 Love Languages, goes, come on, Shaunti.
Come on, I know.
Is it 5? I mean, you are.
I think I actually apologized to Gary at some point along the way. I'm like, I'm so sorry. It just worked out that way. He is so gracious. He was like, yeah.
Well, he didn't trademark the number 5. He did trademark, I'm sure, the 5 love languages.
Yes, exactly.
And what you even say in the book is that it's like, regardless of what your 5 love languages are, and just for everybody's purposes, let's help remind us what those 5 are.
Yeah, because this is so different. That is where our brains go, is the love language, which is what matters to your spouse. Like, do they have a quality time thing where they just want to spend time together? Do they have gifts or acts of service or words of affirmation? Like, are these which matters to them? And that is a good thing, right? Like, we're not saying it's not. It's just what we found in the research for this is, no, actually, for most women, the same 5 things tend to matter.
Wow.
And for most men, the same 5 things tend to matter. So these are the things that are like, talk about high leverage, where just a little bit of effort in a particular way has a big impact. That's what these are.
That's really good. I know for my wife, the 5 love languages, it's quality time and gifts. So basically, my wife wants me to spend a lot of quality time finding her gifts. That's what I've learned. And typically, when you think about the 5 love languages, it's like 1 or maybe 2. What I hear you saying is, no, try to work on all 5.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. At least be aware that for your spouse, statistically, these 5 will probably matter to them. And there may be some that, if 78% of women said this matters, well, okay, 22%, it doesn't really. So you do have to know your spouse and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
But literally, if you will practice, even if you practice 1 or 2 of them, you're likely to have an impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to list these all in the show notes, or if you have the book, you're going to want to, I bookmarked this page because I go back to this. In fact, I just texted you this weekend. I was at a speaking engagement. I'm like, what were the 5 again? For the guys to remember, for the wives. So I forget them. We all forget the fundamentals. The more we come back to them, the easier it will be and the more natural they'll come. So hopefully you're listening to this as a couple, you can be able to reach over and go, that's it for me. Yes, I love those. And just encourage each other as you're listening to each one of these. So let's talk about the fantastic 5 for her. I'm going to let you do those. I'm going to do the ones for the guys to do for his wife.
Yeah. So these are the ones for your husbands, ladies. And these are not going to be 100%, but in most cases, it was in that 75-80% range. And so the first, since it's for a guy, what they're concerned about is all about, am I doing the right thing for her? Like, it's about what I do. Am I a good husband? Am I a good father? So notice that effort and say thank you. And that was one of the things that was the big aha moment now that has helped in a lot of books, a lot of research, to find that for a man, the words thank you are kind of the equivalent of a woman hearing I love you.
Wow.
Right? So that...
Just to notice and to specifically say it too, or not just thank you. Like, don't just say thank you all the time now. It's like,
it's
for
noticing
something.
something. Thanks for changing the light bulbs, right? Like, that was driving me absolutely nuts. Thanks for doing that.
And that doesn't seem like a big deal, but for some of us guys, that is handyman work. Is I did the light bulbs. Did anybody notice? Like, I changed the batteries in the smoke detectors. Like,
Exactly. Did anybody
I can handle
notice?
that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Whatever. He did something with the kids. You were on a Zoom call. It was noisy. The kids were driving you crazy. He took them out in the yard to play catch or something to get them out of the house. Thank you so much for doing that. That meant so much to me. Like, it may seem like a little thing, but it's a really big one.
It makes a big difference. So that's the first one, saying thank you. Okay.
Yeah. And the second one is then taking it to the next step and saying, and you did a really good job at that. Like, I love how you are with the kids. I love how, you have just the right mix when little Johnny, stumbled and hurt himself, that you had the, oh, I'm so sorry, but get back up. You're just the right mix of the sympathy and the suck it up, right?
Yeah.
And so saying you did a good job at that, you may think he knows that. Don't assume that.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we've all, and you say this, and for women only, is that there is that little tinge of insecurity that every guy wakes up with. Every morning I wake up with, like, will anyone notice? Do I matter? Am I strong enough to do what I need to do during the day? And so when somebody actually notices that and says, you did a great job doing that, it does. It puffs you up.
Yep. So then the number 3 thing is even the next level to that, which is to actually mention something that he did well in front of other people. That is like, if we're talking 101, that is like level 501, right? Like that is for a guy. He'll be like, you say something in front of your girlfriends, you're out to dinner with a couple other couples, and you're like, you know what? I was so like over it with that Zoom call. I couldn't hear myself think. I was worried about what my boss was thinking. And then, he took the kids and he kept them and he played with them. And he was so good about this one thing. And you're saying this in front of other people at the dinner. And he's going, yeah, whatever. And inside he's like, dun, 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 dun. Like he's so like inside.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. Tell me if like from a guy's perspective.
No, it is. And I just think about how these build on each other. Thank you. You did a great job at this. Now, next level, I'm going to brag about you in front of my friends. Guys do feel that differently. And really it makes a huge difference that it's my spouse.
Yes.
And you would think that it wouldn't, but it's like I still think my chief goal and one of my chief goals in life is to make Jen happy. And
and most other men.
Yeah. Or just for her to catch her attention. It didn't change when I was playing basketball, when we were dating. And I was like, when she was by the court, in fact, my guys would be like, we always hated when Jen would walk by the court because that's when you kind of took over. I'm like, yeah, because I'm playing for an audience of one at that moment.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, and I think a lot of wives don't realize how much their husband is playing for an audience of one. And what we have to confront, and I probably should like put brackets around these things, and make sure that the women listening to this with kind of maybe a skeptical, like, really, is remember you're thinking, oh, great, now I'm stroking his ego. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm just making the monster worse, right? Here's the thing. He doesn't have an ego in the way you think about it, which is he's so prideful. He's so puffed up. He kind of needs to be taken down a peg or two.
Yeah, he's narcissistic.
Right? Narcissistic. And instead, what we found, the vast majority of men, statistically, depending on the survey, it was somewhere between 75 and 85% of men, actually, they don't have that ego. They have a deep self-doubt, right? And so that's, like you were saying, that is what is the issue. And so you're not puffing up his head when you thank him sincerely, genuinely for something and in front of others if it is something that matters. You're not puffing up his head. You're like giving him this great soothing sense of reassurance as a husband. Yeah,
you're actually filling his soul. It's like you're not puffing up his head, you're filling his soul when you brag.
It's sort of the analogy that somebody told me the other day. They were like, picture a dry and thirsty land and you're giving them a little bit of water. Like a little bit of water and a little bit of water. And that's the issue with these little things, right? Is pretty soon that little bit of water every day, it's not a dry and thirsty land anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's like every guy, most guys have a dream to be on SportsCenter, or if they like to build stuff, they build something. What's the first thing they want to do? They take a picture of it. They want to bring people over to the house. There's something in us as men, and I think it comes back to the image of God. The image of God in all of us is this sense of I want to be a creator. I want to add value. I want to do something to make the area around my life, my garden that God has given me, just a little bit better.
Yep.
But there's something in us as men that's like, did anybody see that? Did anybody see that catch?
Well,
did anybody see that thing that I just built that deck? Did anybody notice that?
This is the perfect example of the curse, right? Like for what we're made for in the garden is to be a creator, right? But the curse was, I hate to tell you this, Adam, you are going to toil the land by the sweat of your brow, and it's going to feel like the thorns and the thistles are always going to be rising up against you. Yeah. You are going to work and you are going to work and you're have effort and you're going to try and you're going to do, and you're always going to feel like, I don't know, am I getting there? It's not quite. And so, ladies, this is just, it's a thing. Yeah. There's an amazing opportunity here. Yep. Okay, so we should probably go on to 4 and 5. Yes, so that was 1, 2, and 3. Number 4, I know some women were waiting for this one. And yes, this is a thing that when a wife shows her husband she desires him sexually and that he pleases her in that way, oh man, there is something very, very important down deep in the heart of a man that speaks to and provides amazing reassurance.
Yeah.
So.
And you've written about that a lot. It's one of those things where, again, this isn't one of those deals where if you're in a situation where you're an abusive, especially sexually abusive, this is not the thing. No. This is not the one that you're wanting to then put into your life.
Well, in any of these, if you're in that kind of a situation, the application is going to be completely different because finding things to thank an abusive husband for, no.
Yeah.
Not going to go well. Yes.
But especially that one, you just want to be clear on that. So that's the first four there. Notice his efforts, say thank you. You did a great job, brag in front of others, shows that she desires him sexually, that he pleases her. What's this last of the Fantastic Five?
So the last one is going to sound so simple. And it's just to show him that he makes you happy. It's so simple. It's
like, how do you, when does a guy feel that?
Okay. So literally I asked this question of guys because I kept hearing this. I'm like, what does that mean? I just want to make her happy. I just want to make her happy. I think you just said that a few minutes ago.
I did. I didn't even realize that.
It's one of my main purposes is I just want to make Jen happy. And we kept asking, how does that get shown, right? And of course, there's many ways that gets shown. But the key is literally if you seem content in your life, if he sees you smile, that is this, like I had one guy who had gone through a difficult season in his marriage. And, one of the things that was a benefit about the research is we were looking at different categories and including what gets you from a place of difficulty to a place of really having a happy marriage. And so we were asking him, what was it that she did? Because we asked each of them, right? What was it that he did? What was it that she did? And this guy said, it used to be that when I would walk in the door, she would have like, hi, yeah. Okay. Hey, the thing needs to be cleaned up or whatever. Like it was just very transactional, whatever. And he said, and then came the day, because we were both working on this, then came the day that I walked in and she turned around and just instinctively I saw this big smile. And it was like he said, and he was telling me this, he started to cry. Actually, I could tell his eyes were getting a little bit red. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know where this emotion is coming from, but I knew that something had changed when it was clear that I made her happy.
So good. Yeah, each one of those are small.
They're little.
They're little
bitty things. Yes, exactly.
And they often may not come naturally. Like it is easy when you're both working and you come back. You just want to relax. You want to. What's on front of mind is just all the wrong things that are happening right now.
That's so easy. Yep.
And so to pull back from that and go, okay, in this moment, how can I help him feel like he makes me happy just by seeing him? Yeah. And when you do that again and again and again, it becomes more natural. It becomes more like dribbling with my left hand for me since I'm right-handed. Okay. So
all right.
Of those,
Brian, which about what, like if we were going to have to say for you and Jen, which of those five mean the most to you personally? I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I think most guys might think it's the fourth one. Like they would just come out, it's that one. But honestly, it's number 3. It's when she brags about me in front of others. There's something about that just, it fills my soul. Like not only she noticed, she's complimenting, because generally I do have this great self-doubt that I wake up with every day. Yeah. And so for her to compliment me and go to that effort, and obviously it's not going to be something that she does every time. That would get odd or
that
awkward.
Would get weird.
That would get weird.
No.
Like every time she walks in a room, like, have you noticed what my husband has done, today? But when it's appropriate, that's great. It
when
doesn't feel
there's
forced.
a thing, when there is something that's genuine.
I love it. That's one of my favorites. So
okay, cool.
So let's talk about the Fantastic Five for him.
All the women are like, okay, come on, it's my time. It's my turn.
Right? Okay. Yeah. So takes her hand, just to take her hand.
Yes.
Number 1. And would this be considered like the public displays of affection?
No, because there's actually another one that's a public, you would say is a public display of affection. There is something, this is going to sound so 1950s, and I'm going to apologize in advance, but listen, I heard this hundreds of times, and it came out on the survey, so I'm just going to say it. There is something about when you're walking across a parking lot, or you're walking into church, or whatever it is, and he reaches across and he takes your hand, just walk hand in hand. There's something that almost feels like he's saying, you're mine. Like, I care for you. I'm protecting you. I'm
with you.
I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I love you. And that feeling of being cared for is, I think, an incredibly under-recognized thing amongst men, because they do care for their wife, right? There's all these ways that the average husband is trying really hard.
Yeah.
Like you're working 60 hours a week or whatever, because you're trying to care for your wife. You care about her. And all that's great. But as we've talked about in other seasons, sometimes those things, they don't feel caring, even though they are.
Right.
And so this is a simple one that feels caring.
Yeah. And this is one of all the 5, I think, that comes least natural to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. It's like I did it when we were dating, but grabbing Jen's hand, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like, well, my hand will get clammy.
Have you asked her? Have you asked her if it
we could ask her when we record tomorrow with her. Yeah, we should. Like, how would that make you feel if Brian would take your? Actually, I don't want to ask her because I'm afraid of what the result's going to be. She's like, yeah, if Brian would just hold my hand a little bit more, I would feel cared for. But that was an interesting one. So takes her hand, simple, not easy to do. Jeff
will. We walk into church and he'll get like right near the door and he'll reach over and take my hand. He's like, yeah, we're marriage authors. I need to like.
We're marriage authors.
So believe me, it's not just you, right? Yeah. Like everybody has to work on it.
This one I do like. Leaves her a message by voicemail, email, or text her during the day saying that he loves her, that he's thinking about her.
Yes.
That's a big one. That's number 2.
It is interesting when we started doing focus groups for this particular book. And we had obviously done many, many interviews and surveys for men only, which is a study of women tell men. And we would ask, because the women would say things like, I just want him to show me that he cares. He's thinking about me. It's like this little, and okay, what would do that? If he would just text me, like occasionally, like to say, oh, give me an example. Like if he just said, hey, honey, I'm going to be home in a couple hours. It's been a rough day. I can't wait to see you later. I love you so much. I heard things like, I would screenshot that text message and look at it again. We heard this over and over and over. And so we tested it on the survey, and son of a gun, for all the men out there to realize this little bitty thing has a huge impact.
And I would just say, if you want a little cheat on this, because most guys aren't thinking about their wives. They're compartmentalized.
They're busy.
Right. Or they're just doing something. They're compartmentalized. So they're working on whatever's in front of them. So put a reminder on your phone and say, send a surprise text at 2 p.m.
Yep.
And she doesn't need to know your trade secrets, She doesn't need to know that, okay.
Except now they're supposed to be listening to this together. So.
But again.
It still counts.
They'll forget.
It still counts.
They'll forget. It counts. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one to do. Again, all these are super easy. It's just they're hard to implement. And they're hard to train yourself to do something different.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know that the right word is hard.
Yeah, maybe a better word.
It's more like you have to think about it, right? Like it's something that, put a reminder to pop up on your phone and just literally take 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then go right back to what you were doing.
Okay.
Because I don't know that that's hard.
It's not hard. Here's what I'd say. They're easy to implement because they're simple. They're also easy to stop doing.
To forget.
Yes, easy to forget. So how do I, whether it's like I'm coming into church, so I'm going to make it a point this week to take my wife's hand as I'm walking in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that. So
okay.
I'm going to do that.
I'm going to ask Jen next week.
Yeah, ask her next week. So leave her a message by voicemail or email or text her. It's like, okay, I can set up a reminder to do that. So I can find ways to get this into my regular rhythms. This third one, our producer this week is Bruce, whom we love. He's a great guy. And he said, this is the one I started reading Shaunti's book just to get ready for this week of producing. And this is the one that saw immediate results. So Bruce, tell us about this one. This third one is putting his arm around her or putting his hand on her knee or rubbing her back or something like that. So tell us about what happened this weekend. When
you're sitting in public.
Oh, when you're sitting in public.
I mean, it matters at home too.
He was.
Yeah. It matters both at home and it matters in public.
That's right. So tell us what happened.
So funny thing, I was reading your book on Saturday afternoon. We had friends over Saturday night for pizza and games. And so while we're at the table playing the game, I remembered this.
Good for you.
I wouldn't have if I hadn't read this, but I just put my arm on her back and just rubbed her back while we're playing the game with friends there. So then the friends go home, we're cleaning up, and she goes, "You were just so sweet tonight." And nothing else changed. I'm pretty sure I acted like I always do, but I think it painted the whole evening as if I was sweeter. Or maybe it's because I did that, I was sweeter. I don't know. But
either way,
immediately
bonus.
I was like, wait, it worked. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
Were you consciously thinking about what you read and then just intentionally did it? Because you wouldn't have normally, I'm guessing that's not your normal MO, Bruce.
I intentionally was thinking about what I read. Also, I told Maria about it earlier that day. So she knew it wasn't like original. And so, I mean, you can even cheat with this. Like, even though your wife knows that these are the Fantastic Five, it still works.
That's good.
That's awesome.
That's good.
I love that story, Bruce. Thanks for sharing that.
So taking your hand, leaving her a message, putting his arm around her, lays his hand on her knee when sitting out in public in front of others, which is a key. And this fourth one, telling her sincerely, "You are beautiful."
Yeah. So this one, it is fascinating how many women have told me something. Like, I was talking to this one woman who is in actually a really difficult season of her relationship. And they had 3 kids. They didn't want to split up, but it was just hard. And she had no idea that I'd done any of the research. She didn't know what I'd found. And this was maybe, 2-3 years ago. And she said, all I need is for him to listen to me sometimes and for him to tell me that I'm beautiful to him. That's it. That's all I need. And I thought, you know what? He probably has heard that from her and he doesn't believe it. He probably is like, it can't be that simple.
Right.
So I'll just work more hours, and provide financially, or it can't be that simple. So I'll just make sure they were doing some DIY projects around the house. I'll just make sure I get all those done when I say they'll be done. And it's like, no, really, actually, she meant that. And statistically, she's very common.
Yeah. Would you think this is equivalent to, for the guy, that latent insecurity of, is anyone noticing how good of a job I'm doing? And so when I feel that, when Jen notices that or she points that out, I do feel different.
Yeah.
Same thing for a woman with this one?
I think for a woman, what we've quantified is that the insecurity for men is, am I able? Am I any good at what I do? The insecurity for women tends to be, am I lovable? Am I special? And am I beautiful to him? And so this sort of is right there in that same kind of category. We just don't know. I mean, I think most men just don't know how much it matters. Yeah. And I think also men, they think it, but it seems awkward to say it. I've heard from so many guys are like, it feels awkward. And so make it your own, right? Like that may not be your...
beautiful.
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, I just wrote a blog about this recently, where I was talking to a woman who her husband is one of those, come on, we're late for whatever, kind of thing. He comes up to the room 10 minutes after they're supposed to have left, where she was getting ready. And he finds her standing with half of her wardrobe like strewn across the bed. She's been trying all these things on. She's sweating. She's trying to figure out. She's like, I have nothing to wear. And because he had sort of started realizing this, he realized what was underneath that. When your wife says, I have nothing to wear, guess what she's thinking? I feel ugly. Yeah. I feel not special. I feel not attractive. He comes up behind her and gives her a giant hug and says, you're beautiful, honey. And she was like, oh my gosh, like I will go to the ends of the earth for this guy. And that is a simple example of how, if you can see those moments, especially as a guy, when she comes downstairs for church, you might be like, okay, we got to get in the car.
Right.
Comes downstairs for getting ready for church. Take 30 seconds and go, wow. Wow.
Yeah. I think about that and showing that with your kids, like, wow, look at your mom.
Yes, I love that.
Look at you.
That's good.
Yeah, and you don't have to. In fact, it's much better to do that in the home than to be that guy on stage. It's like I'm dating my really hot wife or something like that, who's just doing it to play the crowd.
No.
She needs to hear it privately. She needs to hear it in the confines of the home. She needs to hear it when it matters most. And again, probably doesn't come naturally. I would have been that guy when like, it doesn't matter what you put on. Let's just go. And you just think about how that would have killed her soul in that moment, because I'm not really speaking to the need.
And there are probably women who are listening to this who might bristle a little, like, are we turning a woman into an object, right? Like, speaking as a woman, I have a little bit of that, but I want to hear that, but should I want to hear that?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, because the world will say you should be fine on your own. You don't need to tell you don't need to have somebody else. You don't need to have a man affirm that in you.
Affirm that. Yeah, exactly. And it shouldn't be about how you look. And, so for me, I kind of think, should I want this, right? And the reality, though, is that, of course, all of us have these areas of insecurity that we need to work out on our own. We're each responsible for them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's up to a husband. Yes, he's questioning whether he's able. It's not his wife's job to make him feel able, right? But we've been put in each other's lives, and you can speak into that space of insecurity and build him up. And it's this kind of the same thing. Like, okay, this is an area of insecurity. Mm-hmm. And man, it feels good to have the person who knows you best and cares about you most to speak into that space.
Yeah. I wish you hadn't had this last one on here. Okay. Because this is the one that I struggle with. Well, probably I struggle with more so than the holding of the hand. And that is when a guy pulls himself out of the funk, which is just that morose, moody. It's amazing how us guys can kind of conform back into like a moody teenager at times.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Not me.
So, Shaunti, describe what you mean by funk. Like, is this full on depression? Because I've dealt with that. I've been diagnosed with that in the past. And so it's like, when is a funk just a funk and not a depression?
Okay, so let's set aside that sort of, sometimes people are just going through sadness, like a really, like there may be a clinical thing, and there's all sorts of elements to that are beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. A funk is actually much more situational, okay? A funk is, he had a really, really hard day at work. And something went wrong. He's been working on this one big deal. And then he finds out that, there's a competing person at work that's working on the exact same thing, and he might be cut out. And he is ruminating on it. And he comes home and he can't get out of his mind that Steve is betraying him and behind his back. And he's making dinner with his wife and whatever. But he has the black cloud of doom hanging over his head. Mm-hmm. Or whatever the issue is, right? Like everybody has those things, but there's a black cloud. You're just in a funk. You're in a bad mood. You're in a bad mood. There is something very, very insecure that happens in the hearts of statistically most women when their husband is in a bad mood. Mm-hmm. And often that bad mood has nothing to do with them, but it feels like it does. And so when you feel like there is something going on that your husband is not pleased, it brings up, one woman said, I'm this strong, accomplished woman, but all sorts of desperate feelings kind of rise up when I feel like my husband is displeased with me. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so it was disproportionately powerful when a husband would kind of shake it off and go, you know what? I'm going to disperse that little black cloud of doom, and I am going to sort of set that aside, and I'm going to deal with that later, and I'm not going to let that affect how I'm acting around my wife and my kids or whatever. Yeah. It is powerful. Really? Yeah, emotionally.
And I think for me, I kind of expect or want my wife to help me come out of that funk, or I want, the situation to change, or I just want to escape the situation. And what I hear you saying is like, no, and it goes to another one that we're going to talk about. You need to start bossing your feelings around in that moment.
Yes.
Which is another secret that we'll hit.
Yep.
And come out of that. And again, not the same thing to do with depression. It's more that we know it. We know when we're in that funk.
I know. That's the thing is, I think, we can define it kind of, but everybody knows. Yeah. Like to some degree, you you know when you're in a bad mood. At least I assume most people know when they're in a bad mood.
So these Fantastic Five, statistically, you were showing that they just kept coming up.
My goodness,
And so for the guy, for how he could show love for his wife, to take her hand, to leave her a message by voicemail, email, or text during the day, some surprise saying that, he's loving her, he's thinking about her, maybe even go ahead and combine that with, hey, you're hot today, you're beautiful, love what you look like. Putting his arm around her, or maybe laying his hand on her knee, rubbing her back, like Bruce said, in public.
Yeah. And it matters at home too, but there's something about it being in public.
That's so interesting to me.
I can tell you why. And again,
is that like the bragging thing for guys?
It is. Mm-hmm. It's basically saying, and this is going to sound proprietary, and again, 1950s, but it's saying you're mine. Yeah. And it's not an ownership thing. It's not an ownership. Mm-hmm. It's a very personal, I'm so glad I married you. Yeah.
That's the third one. Fourth one, telling her sincerely, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
And then pulling himself out of his funk. Which one means the most to you, Shaunti?
Oh, that last one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Jeff realized that this mattered, like it changed so much in our marriage because, Jeff, I've got to be careful how I say this, but he's talked about this on stage, is he would have the black cloud of doom following him around. Yeah. And it was an insecure feeling.
Yeah.
And there is security that's built. Every guy, when you ask guys, what does your wife need? A lot of them will say security. Well, it's true, but it may be not the kind of security that you think it is.
We tend to think financial.
You tend to think financial. And yeah, okay, that's fine. That's good. But statistically, what matters more for women is emotional security. And a lot of guys are like, what is emotional security? But emotional security is this sense of, like, you're mine, I love you. It is this sense of, I am not going to allow those desperate, insecure feelings to rise up. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to actually show you that, yep, I can pull myself out of this big black mood. This isn't the beginning of things going bad. This is just something going on at work, and it'll be fine.
Okay, we've got the Fantastic Five down, both for her, to help her feel love, for him, where he feels love. So I can hear many people out there going, yeah, but I'm just not that way, or that's just not who I am.
Right.
What do you say to that person?
So it is not necessarily going to come naturally at first. It's like your dribbling analogy, right? With your left hand, you're right-handed. So you practice. It's uncomfortable. And you can't use that as sort of an excuse. Well, okay, so I don't want to do it, right? I mean, Jeff and I were speaking at a conference in Chicago. This was a number of years ago. And we had done, all the research on understanding men, understanding women. And we were actually in the middle of this research for this project. And we were speaking at a marriage conference. And it was one of those churches that decided, even though we kind of begged them not to, they decided to do an all-day marriage conference in the fall, like college football season. And so there were all these people. It was huge, group, but you could tell all the husbands are like, like I'm here because I love my wife. Mm-hmm. I'm torn. Like I want to be out there watching the football game or whatever. And
some of them are looking at scores while you're talking.
I'm sure. But they were there because they loved their wife. Most of them. That was the reason. So at the end of this very long day, we had a Q&A time. And this one woman stands up and she says, I just want to know, I've been listening and I've been taking careful notes of everything that you've told the men and everything you've told the women. And I want to know why you have given the women all the hard things to do and why you've given the men all the easy things to do. And you could hear the oxygen being sucked out of the room as all these men that had been there for like 8 hours were like, And so I told her, I said, listen, the reason that you think it's easy is that what we told the men about you, that's what comes naturally to you because that's how you're wired. Yeah. To him, it doesn't necessarily come naturally to remember to text you during the day or to put his arm around you or to say you're beautiful. Like he's thinking those things, but he didn't know they mattered. Like that's something that's got to be purposeful. And so, that's to us, that's the issue is the stuff that matters to our spouse tends to be those things that don't necessarily come naturally to us. But if you will practice it, you will see the benefit. Like what the story that Bruce told, right? Like he just did one little thing. He put his arm around his wife, rubbed her back. You were so sweet tonight.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. And it can be that simple. It doesn't solve, of course, it doesn't solve the big problems, right? But let me tell you, these things, they build so much goodwill. It makes those big problems easier to solve.
That's true. It helps when the tough times do come in marriage. You have this foundation of security, of love, of companionship that's been built up over time.
Yep.
And so then it makes life a lot more bearable together. As I think about these 5 little things, they make a huge difference, and I think about one of the passages that I love in Exodus 23, right before they're about to go into the land. And God says to them, it's one of my favorite verses, little by little, I will drive them out before you until you have taken possession of the land.
I like that.
There's something about the little by little. It's the compounding interest. And this really could be the compounding interest of your marriage. So
this really is.
It builds over time and makes those hard things a little bit easier. Doesn't solve it, but makes them a little bit easier. And as I thought about, when I practiced those fundamentals, it didn't mean that I nailed them every time, like it didn't mean that I didn't dribble off my foot with my left hand. It didn't mean that I made every free throw. We're still going to make mistakes in marriage. We're still not going to do everything right. But when they start becoming a little more natural, the game is a little bit more easier to enjoy.
Yeah.
And I think more people would be to that highly happy stage. As we said, we're watching the pros. What do the highly happy couples do?
Absolutely.
They practice these things over and over and over again.
It will make a difference if you literally will put these like in a notes app on your phone. Like have them in front of you so that you can remind yourself, especially at the beginning while you're practicing.
Yep. And that's what we would encourage you to do. That's our challenge. Like for this one, print them out, put them on your phone, put them somewhere, make them predominant until they become a little bit more natural, until you can remember them right off the top of your head. Read these to each other and maybe even ask at the end of this podcast, you listen to it, okay, which one means the most to you?
Yeah, or are these true of you? Because there are going to be a few people who are exceptions.
That's true. So are these true? Which one means the most to you? And which one do you think I already do pretty well at? Because chances are we're probably doing well at one of these. And
that's the thing. There's going to be some people who are scared to ask that question. Like, which one am I already doing okay, right? But trust me, statistically, it is highly likely that even if you don't do it maybe as often as your spouse likes, you do some of these things. And so your spouse may say, like, if you're the husband, you're asking this question, I really do love it when you put your arm around me in church. Like, it doesn't happen that often, but I really love it. Okay, well, so now I know. And I can do that more.
That's good. The Fantastic Five, the 5 little things that make a huge difference in your marriage. It already made a big difference in Bruce's life. He did something new and different, and he's already reaping the rewards. So I would just say, if you're skeptical, go ahead and start trying them and see what happens. But I love that secret. Can't wait to talk about more. Thanks for joining us for this episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please hit like or subscribe. And please leave a review or a comment. It just helps get the word out to more couples so that they could find hope for their own marriage. And listen, if you haven't picked up Shaunti's book that we're talking about all this season long, The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages, you're going to want to get that and maybe grab one to give away, because that's really what we're about here at Family Life. We want to help you experience oneness so that you could impact your corner of the world. And listen, we've got a lot more help and hope for your marriage and family at FamilyLife.com. You can find other articles, you can find podcasts, you can find shows, small group resources. You'll want to check that out at FamilyLife.com.